The world can only live as one, free. Part 2 of 2. What every human being actually needs and what naturally arises when those needs are genuinely met. And we open with a quote from John Lennon, contrasting from Henry Kissinger. Imagine all the people living life in peace. The wish and the observation. John Lennon wrote Imagine in 1971. Most people alive today have heard it. It imagines a world without hunger, without war, without the endless competition for who has more. It is a genuinely beautiful song, and it has moved people, not because it is a good argument, but because it points at something real, something that human beings recognize somewhere underneath the noise of ordinary life as what they actually want. But it is a wish, a longing, something imagined into an unspecified future and held there by the force of wanting it to be true. Lennon was seeing something real. He just had no structural ground to stand on when he described it, so it came out as a dream rather than as an observation. This essay is the observation that the wish was always pointing toward. Not a better wish, not a more refined version of the same longing, an actual structural account of what every human being requires in order to be genuinely healthy, and what naturally, without effort, without moral instruction, without enforcement, arises when those requirements are genuinely met. The essay that came before this one showed what the pleasure-seeking drive, left to develop its own logic without interruption, arrives at: dominion, license, the permanent arrest of the closed fist. That essay went into dark territory because it needed to. This one begins in that darkness and moves towards something else. Not by looking away from what the preceding essay showed, but by asking, what is the structural antidote? What specifically does the human organism actually need? And what becomes possible when it gets those things? 2. Free. The word that carries the whole argument. The title of this essay has one word in it that needs to be understood precisely before anything else lands correctly. That word is free. The word free comes from an ancient root, F-R-I-E, that also gives us the word friend. This is not a coincidence. It is a structural truth preserved in language. Freedom and friendship come from the same place because they describe the same condition from two different angles. Freedom is what you are when you are genuinely not subject to dominion. Not merely when no one is currently threatening you, when you are genuinely able to encounter the world, to be surprised by it, to give to it, to receive from it, without a power arrangement structuring every exchange. Friendship is also what becomes possible when two free people. Friendship is what becomes possible between two free people. Genuine friendship, not the managed relationship of the networked, the transactional connection of the powerful, but actual friendship requires that both people are genuinely free, that neither is managing the other, that either one could leave, could disagree, could bring something unexpected, and the relationship could hold that. License, which is what the preceding essay described as the innermost chamber of dominion, is what the powerful mistake for freedom. The person with license is not free. They are dominant. And dominant is the opposite of free, because the dominant person has organized their entire life around the prevention of genuine encounter. The cage imprisons its builder as surely as its occupant. The closed fist cannot receive. The person who has achieved dominion has lost the very capacity for surprise, for genuine meaning, for joy, that makes being alive worth anything. Free, in this essay, means something precise and positive. It means the condition of the person who is genuinely met in their genuine needs, who genuinely belongs somewhere, who is genuinely able to look at their own inner life without being told what to find there. The condition under which love, not the managed warmth of the networked, but actual love becomes possible. The condition under which a person can ask the real questions about their own existence and actually receive answers. One more thing about free that must be said before we move on. You have to be free in order to look clearly. This sounds simple. It is one of the most consequential observations in this entire project. A person who is genuinely afraid of where the next meal is coming from, afraid of violence, afraid of the systems of power that can descend on them without warning, cannot look openly and honestly at their own experience or at the world. Fear narrows attention to the immediate threat. It is supposed to. That is what fear is for. But it means that the person organized around fear is structurally unable to ask the questions that genuine seeing requires, unable to inquire, unable to arrive at their own genuine understanding of what is happening and what they might be able to do about it. The systems of dominion described in the preceding essay understand this perfectly, even when they could not articulate it. The most efficient way to prevent a population from seeing clearly is to keep enough of them afraid enough of enough things that genuine inquiry never becomes possible. Fear does the work that force used to have to do, and it does it far more efficiently, at far less cost, with far less visible ugliness. This is why the list of genuine needs that follows is not merely a political wish list. It is a description of the conditions under which a genuine human seeing becomes possible, at scale, across civilization. The world that meets these needs for everyone is a world in which enough people are free enough to look clearly, and a world in which enough people can look clearly cannot be organized around the pleasure economy's innermost logic for very long. 3. What every human being actually needs. We are retiring the word rights in this essay. Not because the things it names are unimportant, they're among the most important things this book names, but because the word has been so thoroughly captured by the pleasure economy's logic that it now means almost the opposite of what it should. I have a right to ignore the science. I have a right to do God's work by killing. The word has been turned into a weapon for license rather than a name for what the organism genuinely requires. We replace it with a simpler and more precise description: what the organism actually needs. Not what it deserves, not what it is owed, what is structurally, demonstrably, measurably cannot function without. The list that follows is not a wish list. Every item on it passes the same test. Can it be shown that without this, the organism cannot function as a genuinely healthy human being? Can anything be removed without producing measurable harm? Does anything fall outside this list that the organism cannot genuinely do without? The list was arrived at by asking those questions seriously. The list seals. Air. Breathable, clean, continuously available. Without this, nothing on the list is discussable. It is the first because It is first because it is first. Water. Clean, liquid, continuously available. The body is mostly water. It cannot defer this need. Every living system on Earth is organized around water's continuous availability and renewal. Food. Sufficient nourishment to keep the body functioning. Not any particular diet. The specific nutrition required to sustain a living, thinking, feeling human being. Physical safety. Shelter from weather, shelter from violence. A person who is constantly in danger of physical harm cannot think clearly, cannot relate genuinely, cannot do anything requiring sustained attention. Safe housing is not a luxury. It is the spatial container within which all other human functioning becomes possible. Healthcare. Access to the care of the body through which all human experience occurs. When the body deteriorates without care, every other capacity deteriorates with it. Adequate sleep. The body and mind cannot function without it. This is as biologically non-negotiable as water. Economic systems that structurally prevent people from sleeping enough through impossible schedules, multiple jobs, insecure housing, chronic anxiety, are violating something as fundamental as the need for food. Education. The development of the capacity to think, to inquire, to read, to navigate the world that the child will inhabit as an adult. Not the transmission of approved beliefs, the cultivation of the genuine ability to examine, question, and understand. A child without education cannot participate meaningfully in the systems that will govern their life. Belonging. The experience of genuinely mattering to other people, of being recognized and included within a community. Isolation is not merely painful, it is measurably, demonstrably damaging to human health, as harmful as smoking in terms of long-term outcomes. The social animal requires genuine community as surely as the biological animal requires water. Partnership. The ability to love and be loved, to choose one's intimate relationships freely, to bring the full self into genuine encounter with another person. The prohibition of love across racial lines, across gender lines, across any lines drawn by ideology is a direct violation of something the organism cannot do without. Meaningful contribution. The ability to give something that matters, to participate in something larger than one's own survival. Research on purposelessness and its effects on human health is substantial and consistent. The person who has no meaningful way to contribute, who is present in the community but cannot give anything to it, deteriorates in ways that no material provision repairs. Play. The ability to do something for its own sake, without it needing to produce something. This is not a childhood luxury. Play is the primary mode through which living beings learn, integrate, and remain genuinely present. The adult who never plays is losing something the organism requires. The society that eliminates play from childhood produces measurably damaged adults. Contact with the natural world. Time within living systems outside of built environments. The human nervous system evolved within nature over millions of years. The research on what happens when that contact is removed, elevated anxiety, impaired immune function, reduced capacity for the reflective attention that genuine inquiry requires, is consistent and substantial. Time that is genuinely one's own, unstructured time in which no one else's agenda governs what happens. Without this, education cannot deepen, play cannot occur, spiritual inquiry cannot begin, and political participation means nothing beyond its most minimal formal expression. The person whose every waking hour is managed or sold cannot access most of the other items on this list, even if they are formally available. Genuine participation in the decisions that shape one's life. Consequential engagement in the processes that determine the conditions one lives within. The person who cannot participate in those processes is not a citizen. They are a subject. The difference is the difference between a human being and a managed resource. The freedom to look inward without being told what to find. The freedom to ask the genuine questions about one's own deepest nature, to inquire without prohibition, to arrive at one's own understanding of what is most deeply true about one's own existence. This is not the freedom to practice a particular religion. It is something prior to any religion, the freedom to look at all. Societies that prohibit this, that enforce by threat what people must believe about their own inner life, are committing the deepest available violation of what the organism requires. Because without this freedom, none of the other freedoms can be fully inhabited. You cannot be genuinely free in the world if you are not free to look at your own experience of being alive. That is the list. Nothing falls outside it that the organism cannot function without. Nothing within it can be removed without producing real and measurable harm. This is not a wish. It is a structural inventory of what a human being actually is and what being that thing requires. Four, what arises and why it does not need to be taught. Here's the claim that makes this essay more than a political document. It needs to be stated plainly, without hedging, without the softening that comes from wanting to seem reasonable. What the genuine needs on that list, when the genuine needs on that list are genuinely met, when a person is safe, fed, rested, educated, belonging, free to love whom they love, free to contribute, free to play, free to look inward, something specific happens. Not something that needs to be cultivated through moral instruction. Not something that needs to be enforced through social pressure. Something that simply arises, the way warmth arises from the sun, the way water moves downhill. Love arises. Not the managed warmth of the networked, not the transactional affection of people who need something from each other. Actual love, the direct, unguarded orientation of one living being toward another, wanting what is genuinely good for them, able to give without needing to receive in the same transaction. This does not need to be taught to a person who is genuinely free and genuinely safe. It is what human beings are underneath. Honesty arises. The person who is genuinely safe, who does not need to manage how they appear in order to survive, does not need to be taught to tell the truth. Truth-telling is the natural behavior of the organism that is not threatened. Lying is what organisms learn when they need to protect themselves from the consequences they cannot otherwise avoid. Remove the threat, and the lying loses its purpose. Generosity arises. The person who genuinely has enough, not the accumulated surplus of the pleasure economy, but the genuine satisfaction of genuine needs, gives naturally. Because giving is what fullness does. The river that is genuinely full overflows. It does not decide to overflow. It does not choose generosity. Generosity is what overflowing looks like from the outside. Curiosity arises. The person who is not organized around fear, who is not spending their available attention on threat monitoring, becomes naturally, genuinely curious about the world, about other people, about what is actually true. This is not an achievement. It is what human beings are when the survival emergency lifts. Cooperation arises. Not the enforced cooperation of people who have no choice, but the genuine cooperation of people who recognize that working together produces something that none of them could produce alone, and who finds that recognition satisfying in itself. None of these need to be protected by moral instruction, produced by moral instruction. All of them need to be uncovered. The person who is genuinely met in their genuine needs does not become a better person. They become more fully what they already are. Underneath the strategies for surviving a world that was not meeting their needs, underneath the strategies for surviving a world that was not meeting their needs, underneath the coping mechanism and the defenses and the managed presentations, underneath all of that, which is real and which formed for real reasons and which deserves genuine compassion, is the person who was already capable of love, honesty, generosity, and curiosity. The primary floor does not build that person. It removes what was covering them. 5. The pyramid upside down. Most people who have encountered Abraham Maslow's work remember the pyramid. Physiological needs at the bottom, safety above that, belonging above that, esteem above that, and at the very top, like a prize for those who have successfully climbed all the lower levels, self-actualization, the fullest possible expression of the person's genuine potential. The pyramid has been read almost universally as a ladder to climb. First, you get the basic needs taken care of. Then, eventually, if you're fortunate and disciplined, you might arrive at self-actualization. It is the elite destination, the spiritual reward for the successful navigation of everything below it. This project turns the pyramid upside down, not as a rhetorical gesture, as a structural correction. Self-actualization, the fullest expression of what a human being genuinely is not at the top of the pyramid. It is the ground beneath the pyramid. It is what the person already is. The pyramid is not a ladder to climb towards something. It is a description of what is covering something that was always already there. We are not building human flourishing from below, adding qualities to a bare organism until it becomes fully realized person. We are removing, layer by layer, what the wound has placed on top of something that was never damaged. The person who needs nothing from the list is not gradually ascending toward their best self. They are gradually being uncovered. The best self was never absent. It was covered. This changes everything about the political project. If we are building from below, the project is infinite, always more to add, always the possibility that the project will be interrupted before completion. If we are uncovering, the project is finite. The covering is completely describable. What can be completely described can be completely removed. And what is underneath is not something we have to build. It is already there. It has always been there. 6. The only actual antidote. The first essay showed that every addiction follows the same structure: the absent stopping signal, the closing circuit that never closes, the tightening fists. And it showed that the progression from ordinary pleasure-seeking to dominion to license follows the same structure at a larger scale. Freedom, genuine freedom, F-R-I-E, the condition of genuine friendship with existence, is the only structural antidote to this. Not a moral intervention, not willpower, not a better ideology. The actual restoration of the genuine stopping signal that pleasure was always simulating but never providing. The organism that is genuinely free, genuinely met in its genuine needs, genuine belonging, genuinely able to look at what it actually is, has access to the genuine rest and pleasure that pleasure could never deliver. The false beliefs that sustain the system of dominion, the beliefs that some people are worth more than others, that scarcity is natural rather than produced, that the closed fist is simply how things are and must always be, are not errors that can be corrected by better arguments. They are adaptations. They are what people believe when they are genuinely afraid, and when the fear is genuinely reasonable given their actual circumstances. The path out of them is not a better argument. It is the removal of circumstances that make the fear reasonable. A person who is genuinely safe, genuinely fed, genuinely belonging, genuinely free to look, that person does not need to be argued out of the belief that the world is organized around scarcity and dominion. They simply see differently because they can. Because the fear that was structuring their seeing is no longer the governing condition of their life. This is the connection between the political project and the spiritual one that the system of dominion has always worked very hard to prevent from being made visible. A population that is genuinely free, genuinely met in its genuine needs, genuinely belonging, genuinely able to inquire, is a population that can see. And a population that can see cannot be organized around the pleasure economy's logic for very long. Because what it sees, when it looks clearly, is that the law does not work, that the fist never actually rests, that the caged bird never produces the joy of the free bird's song. That power is not the ultimate satisfaction, it is the ultimate addiction, the furthest expression of the absent stopping signal. 7. Two economies and the line between them. There are two economies. This is not a political position, it is a structural observation. The first economy is the meeting of genuine needs. Everything on the list in section 3 of this essay. This economy has a stopping point. When genuine needs are genuinely met, something closes. Not permanently. Needs recur. The body requires continuous maintenance. Belonging requires continuous tending. But there is a quality of saturation available within genuine need meeting that pleasure cannot touch. The rest of the lion, the open hand, the body that has genuinely eaten, genuinely rested, genuinely belonged. The second economy is the pleasure economy, everything above the line of genuine need. The vacation, the second home, the accumulation of surplus beyond what any genuine need could account for. This economy is not inherently wrong. Surplus, engaged freely and joyfully by people whose genuine needs are genuinely met, is one of the things that makes human civilization interesting and beautiful. The problem is not surplus. The problem is surplus built on a floor that has not been established. that requires some people to remain below the line of genuine need meeting so that the others can accumulate without limit above it. The line between the two economies is not legislative, it is structural. Below it, the organism cannot function as a healthy human being. Above it, the organism can, and the surplus, freely engaged, is not the problem. It is a gift. The pleasure economy becomes a structural violation only when it is built on the deliberate maintenance of conditions that keep enough people below the line to fuel the differential that makes dominion feel like something. Raising the floor requires lowering the ceiling. This is not communism. It is not any particular political system. It is the structural consequence of taking genuine need meeting seriously for everyone within a shared civilization. The accumulation without terminus, the billionaire problem, the dominion problem, the license problem, does not work. Not morally, structurally. It runs the wrong direction. It produces the permanent arrest of the closed fist rather than the open rest of the genuinely met organism. And what does not work eventually stops. Because the living world does not suspend its own nature in order to accommodate the fist's refusal to open. 8. The flag. This is not a wish. It is not naive. It is not the dream of someone who has not looked at what the preceding essay described without flinching. It is a structural observation stated here plainly and as firmly as this project knows how to state anything. The world can only live as one, free. Not as a destination to be eventually reached through sufficient progress, as the description of what was always already the case at the level of the ground that holds every human being who has ever lived. The ground does not hold some people and withhold itself from others. It holds everyone. It has always held everyone. It has never done anything else. What Lennon was imagining is not a utopia that must be constructed. It is the condition that is already present at the level where all human beings are constituted, at the level below the wound's history, below the ego's strategies, below the pleasure economy's logic, below everything that the preceding essay named and examined. At that level, the unity, is not something to be achieved, it is something to be uncovered. The human being who is free, met in their needs, genuinely belonging, able to look at what they actually are, does not need to be instructed to recognize the humanity of other people. They simply see it because they can, because they are no longer organized primarily around the management of their own survival, because the fear that was preventing clear seeing is no longer the governing condition of their life. Love, honesty, generosity, curiosity, cooperation. These are not the achievements of sufficiently advanced civilization. They are what human beings already are beneath what 12,000 years of survival under conditions of genuine threat have required them to become. The wound is finite. The covering is completely describable. What is underneath has never been damaged. Lennon was right about what he was pointing at. He just did not have the structural ground to stand on when he described it. This project does. The wish was always an observation that had not yet found its footing. It has footing now. Free. One. The same word. The same ground. the same inexhaustible presence that has never, for a single moment, withheld itself from any living being. Appreciate your patience and attention.